The noise of numbers on the laptop screen echoed like a monotonous symphony in the office on the 85th floor. Alexander Bennett gazed out the picture window at the Manhattan skyline as his mind wandered away from the financial spreadsheets that occupied his desk. It was Valentine's Day, and for the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to think about Sophia Hayes. The Bennett Technologies empire had grown exponentially since she left, as if the void in her chest could be filled with leading zeros in a bank account. His assistant, Richard, knocked discreetly on the frosted glass door. "Mr. Bennett, the driver is waiting to take you to the dinner with the Chinese investors." Alexander adjusted his navy blue tie, a gift from her. "Cancel. Tell them I had a family emergency." The irony of the excuse was not lost on him. Family was something he hadn't had in a long time. "But sir, the deal can wait until tomorrow." Alexander grabbed his Armani coat and headed to the elevator, ignoring the surprised looks from his employees. At the reception of the luxurious Bennett building, he waved his driver away. The streets of New York pulsed with the city's characteristic energy. Couples holding hands occupied the sidewalks, and shop windows decorated with red hearts constantly reminded him of the date he tried so hard to ignore. At 35, Alexander Bennett was considered Manhattan's most eligible bachelor, but the gossip pages speculating about his romantic status had no idea the weight he carried. His steps unconsciously took him to Greenwich Village, where he used to walk with Sophia on Sunday mornings. Café Lumière, with its yellowish lights and welcoming atmosphere, was still there, like a photograph frozen in time. It was then that his world stopped. Through the fogged window, he saw a face he knew better than himself. Sophia was sitting at one of the corner tables, her brown hair shorter than he remembered, but her smile, that smile that haunted him in his dreams, remained the same. However, that wasn't what made his heart skip a beat. Sitting in front of him was a small boy, no more than 4 years old, with gray-blue eyes identical to his own. The boy gestured excitedly as he spoke, and Sophia watched him adoringly, just as she used to look at Alexander. Before his brain could process the implication of that scene, his legs were already carrying him into the cafe. The doorbell announced her entrance, and time seemed to freeze as Sophia looked up. The recognition in her gaze was followed by something Alexander had never seen in her before: fear. "Who's the man in the suit, Mommy?" The boy's curious voice cut through the silence like a sharp blade. Sophia paled, her hands shaking slightly around her coffee cup. "Lucas, honey, why don't you go up to the counter and order another cookie for Shannon?" Little Lucas jumped out of his chair with excitement, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air. Alexander watched him walk away, noticing the same features he saw every morning in the mirror. "How long?" His voice came out harsher than he intended. "Alexander, please," Sophia started, but he interrupted her. "How long did you intend to hide this from me? You don't understand. It's not that simple." "Simple?" Alexander struggled to keep his voice down. "You disappeared 5 years ago, without explanation, and now I find out I have a son. What could be simpler than that?" Sophia looked nervously at Lucas, who was busy choosing his cookie. "There are things you don't know, things about your company, about what happened back then." "Then explain to me." Alexander sat in the chair Lucas had occupied. "Because right now, I can't think of a single reason that would justify you depriving me of meeting my own son." Lucas's return interrupted the conversation. His curious eyes alternated between his mother and the stranger who took her place. "Mommy, can I eat my cookie at home? I'm tired." Sophia seemed relieved at the interruption. "Of course, love." She started to gather her things, but Alexander gently grabbed her wrist. "Tomorrow noon, at Le Bernardin. I need to know everything, Sophia." She hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I'll be there." Alexander watched as mother and son left the cafe, their world spinning on a new axis. The city lights were starting to come on, and he sat there, trying to process how completely his life had changed in a matter of minutes. His phone vibrated, another message from Richard about the deal with the Chinese. For the first time in his career, Alexander realized that there was something more important than billion-dollar contracts and corporate mergers. Somewhere in that town, there was a little boy who shared his blood, his name, his story, and he was determined to find out why this truth had been denied him for so long. The Bennett Technologies office remained silent that morning as Alexander stared at the computer screen without actually seeing it. The last 18 hours had been a whirlwind of emotions and discoveries that threatened to unravel the meticulous control he maintained over his life. Richard entered hesitantly, carrying a folder with documents from the Chinese agreement. "Mr. Bennett, investors are awaiting a response regarding the rescheduling of the meeting." "Cancel all my appointments for today," Alexander replied, his firm voice masking the storm within. "And Richard, I need you to do some discreet research. I want to know everything about Sophia Hayes over the last 5 years." The assistant nodded, recognizing the seriousness in his boss's tone. "Any specific parameters, sir?" "Everything. Where you worked, where you lived, medical records." Alexander paused, the next words weighing on his tongue. "And be sure to include any information about your son, Lucas." As Richard left, Alexander swiveled his chair to take in the view of Manhattan. The city seemed different now, as if every building, every street held a secret that he needed to discover. His thoughts were interrupted by the vibrating of his cell phone, a message from Sophia. "I can't do Le Bernardin. Can we meet at Washington Square Park? 1 p.m. Lucas will be at school." The change of location irritated him momentarily, but it made sense. The park had been witness to several important moments in their relationship. Alexander responded with a simple "okay" and turned his attention to his computer screen, where he began obsessively searching for any mention of Sophia Hayes in the company's files from the past 5 years. At 12:45, Alexander was already walking through the park, his legs automatically taking him to the bench where they usually sat. Autumn painted the trees in shades of red and gold, a beauty he barely noticed in his anxiety. Sophia was already there, wearing a simple beige coat that contrasted with the memory of the elegant clothes she used to wear when she worked as a marketing executive. "You're late," she commented as he approached, an echo of her earlier teasing. "You're 5 years late for this conversation," Alexander snapped, sitting down next to her. Sophia sighed, her hands tightening on the strap of her bag. "Where do you want to start?" "For the first time, why did you leave?" "Do you remember the Artemis project?" Sophia asked, her eyes fixed on a distant point. Alexander frowned. The Artemis project had been one of Bennett Technologies' biggest successes, a revolutionary security system that had quadrupled the company's stock value. "What about him?" 3 weeks before I left, I found some documents in the development department. The system had critical security flaws that were deliberately ignored to meet the release deadline. Alexander felt his stomach drop. "That's impossible. All protocols were followed." "They weren't," Sophia continued, her voice shaking slightly. "And when I tried to take this to the council, I received threats, not from you, but from people close to you. People who suggested that accidents happen to those who ask too many questions. Why didn't you come to me?" "Because you were blinded by the company's success. And then—" She hesitated, running her hand through her hair in a nervous gesture he knew well. "I found out I was pregnant. I couldn't risk it." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Alexander processed every word, every implication. His company, his legacy, had been built on a lie that cost him not only his integrity, but his family. "Who made the threats?" "Marcus Henderson," Sophia replied, referring to the then director of operations. "He had proof that I had accessed confidential documents. He turned my search for the truth into corporate espionage." Alexander felt anger rise in his chest. Marcus had retired 2 years earlier, celebrated as one of the pillars of the company's success. "And Lucas?" he asked, his voice softening at the mention of his son. What is he like?" A small smile lit up Sophia's face for the first time. "He's brilliant. He loves dinosaurs and has an impressive collection of books on the subject. He asks questions that sometimes I don't even know how to answer. She paused. He has his temper, you know? Determined when he wants something. Alexander closed his eyes, imagining all the firsts he had lost. First steps, first words, first smiles. I want to meet him. Properly. I know, Sophia replied softly. But we need to do this right. He's small and sensitive. We can't just throw him into this situation. What about me? How much longer do I have to wait to be a father to my own child? Alexander. Sophia lightly touched his arm, the first contact between them in 5 years. I know you have every right to be furious with me, but I ask that you think about what's best for Lucas. He nodded slowly, knowing she was right. How do we start? How about a casual meeting? There's a cafe near his school. We could meet there as if it were coincidence. Let him get used to your presence first. The plan was sensible, even if it tested his patience. And then? One step at a time, Sophia replied, standing up. I need to pick you up from school. I'll text you the coffee details. As he watched her walk away, Alexander realized that his life had changed irrevocably. There was a son to meet, a corporate truth to investigate, and, perhaps most importantly, a trust to rebuild. His phone vibrated again, Richard with the first information about Sophia. But for the first time in his professional life, Alexander ignored the notice. There were more important decisions to make, starting with a call to his legal team about a certain project called Artemis. The afternoon was drawing to a close when Alexander returned to his office, his mind still processing his conversation with Sophia in the park. The weight of the truth about the Artemis project and Lucas's existence consumed him, making it impossible to focus on the dozens of unread emails in his inbox. Richard knocked on the door, carrying a brown folder. Mr. Bennett, I found some interesting information. He deposited the documents on the glass table. For the past 5 years, Sophia has worked as a freelance marketing consultant for small businesses. She lives in Brooklyn with Lucas, in a modest apartment. The boy attends St. James Elementary School. Alexander flipped through the papers, his eyes lingering on a photo of Lucas at a school event. The boy was smiling widely, holding a science project about dinosaurs. Any mention of Project Artemis in the old files? Most documents from that time have been digitized and stored on secure servers. Richard hesitated. But I found something curious. 2 weeks before Sophia's departure, there were a series of unauthorized accesses to the main system, all traced back to Marcus Henderson's terminal. Continue investigating, Alexander ordered, his expression hardening. I want every detail about Henderson's activities during that period. And Richard, keep this between us. After the assistant left, Alexander picked up his phone, rereading the message Sophia had sent about the cafe near Lucas's school. Little Bean Coffee Shop, Thursday, 3:30 p.m. His fingers drummed on the table as he considered his next move. The cell phone ring interrupted his thoughts. It was Catherine Matthews, the company's chief lawyer. Alex, we need to talk about some irregularities we found in the old records. My office now, he replied, recognizing the urgency in his voice. Catherine entered minutes later, her professional demeanor contrasting with the concern in her eyes. We were doing a routine audit of pre-2020 projects and found significant discrepancies in Artemis. What kind of discrepancies? Altered test reports, falsified approvals. She paused, adjusting her glasses. And most importantly, evidence that security failures were deliberately hidden from the board. Alexander felt his stomach drop. Sophia was right all along. I want a thorough investigation, Catherine. Discreet but exhaustive. Alex, she hesitated. This could have serious ramifications for the company. Artemis is still used by dozens of financial institutions. Then we will do what is right, he replied firmly, even if it means admitting our mistakes and correcting them. After Catherine left, Alexander spent hours delving into old reports and emails, searching for clues that might have slipped through his obsession with the company's success. How had he not noticed the manipulations taking place under his own nose? Her phone vibrated again. Another message from Sophia. Lucas won't stop talking about the man in the cool suit at the cafe. Maybe we can speed things up a bit. An involuntary smile appeared on his lips, only to be interrupted by an urgent knock on the door. Richard entered, his face pale. Sir, I have just discovered something disturbing. Marcus Henderson was not alone in the Artemis scheme. I found suspicious wire transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands linked to one of the current board members. Alexander felt his blood run cold. Who? Victor Reynolds. The name hit Alexander like a punch. Victor was his mentor, the man who had guided him since his first days at the company. Betrayal had a bitter taste. Prepare an extraordinary council meeting for tomorrow, he ordered, his controlled voice masking the storm within. And Richard, organize additional security for Sophia and Lucas, if they threatened her once. I've already arranged it, sir. A discreet team has been monitoring their apartment since this morning. Alexander nodded, grateful for his assistant's initiative. He turned his attention to Lucas's photo, studying every detail of the face that looked so much like his own. He had lost 5 years of his son's life because of corporate secrets and excessive ambitions. I wouldn't waste another day. He picked up his phone and typed a reply to Sophia. How about a trip to the Bronx Zoo on Saturday? I heard they have a new dinosaur exhibit. The answer came almost instantly. Lucas will love it. But Alexander, be careful. Some people still have a lot to lose if the truth comes out. He looked out the window of his office, watching the lights of Manhattan begin to glow in the twilight. Somewhere down there, your child was probably doing homework, oblivious to the hurricane that was about to transform his life. Alexander would do anything to protect him, even if it meant destroying the empire he built. On Thursday afternoon, Alexander adjusted his tie for the 10th time as he looked across the street at the Little Bean coffee shop. The welcoming establishment, with its large windows and vintage sign, was beginning to see an influx of parents and children at school drop-off time. His heart raced when he saw Sophia and Lucas approaching. Remember, he muttered to himself, casual and natural. Entering the cafe a few minutes after them, Alexander pretended to be surprised to find them. Lucas, wearing a school uniform and a backpack with dinosaur prints, was the first to notice him. Look, Mommy, it's the man in the suit again, the boy exclaimed with genuine enthusiasm. Sophia smiled nervously. What a coincidence, Mr. Bennett. Do you live around here? Please call me Alexander, he replied, keeping his tone light as his heart thundered in his chest. Actually, I have a meeting nearby and I heard this cafe has the best cookies in town. They are the best, Lucas agreed emphatically, especially the chocolate ones with extra chocolate chips. Lucas, Sophia interjected softly, why don't we let Mr. Alexander sit with us? He looks like he needs a break from work. The boy nodded vigorously, pushing his backpack aside to make room. Alexander sat up, trying to control the shaking in his hands as he watched his son closely for the first time. What's your favorite dinosaur? Lucas asked abruptly, surprising both Alexander and Sophia. Well, Alexander thought quickly, mentally thanking himself for the hours he spent researching dinosaurs the night before. I always found Therizinosaurus fascinating. Those huge claws were impressive. Lucas's eyes lit up. Do you know Therizinosaurus? Most people only talk about the T-Rex. He dove into his backpack, pulling out a picture book. Look, I have a whole page about him here. For the next 45 minutes, Alexander found himself completely absorbed in Lucas's world. The boy excitedly explained every detail about his favorite dinosaurs, occasionally stopping to take sips of his hot chocolate. Sophia watched the interaction with a mix of emotions on her face. And you work in that tall building with the shiny windows? Lucas asked, pointing out the cafe window. Yes, I work there, Alexander replied, sharing a quick glance with Sophia. Actually, I'm organizing a special dinosaur exhibit at the Natural History Museum. Maybe you and your mom would like to... Alexander's phone rang, interrupting the invitation. It was Richard. "Sir, we need you immediately. Victor Reynolds is trying to call an emergency council meeting." Alexander felt his blood run cold. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Hanging up the phone, he looked apologetically at Lucas and Sophia. "I'm sorry, but I have to go. Emergency at work." "Aw," Lucas protested. "But you haven't even finished reading my book." "How about we continue our talk about dinosaurs at the zoo on Saturday?" Alexander suggested, looking at Sophia for approval. "Can we, Mommy? Please?" Lucas begged. Sophia hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Of course, love. It would be nice." On the way to the office, Alexander received a message from Catherine. "Reynolds is agitated. Found traces of the Artemis investigation." The tension between protecting his newfound family and facing the consequences of his corporate past was reaching a breaking point. When Alexander entered the elevator at Bennett Technologies, he had already made his decision. The empire he built could fall apart, but he wouldn't let that affect Lucas or Sophia again. The board meeting room was filled with tension when he entered. Victor Reynolds, a 60-year-old man with graying hair and an impeccable suit, stood at the head of the table. "Alexander, I'm glad you could join us," Victor said, his tone falsely cordial. "We were discussing some concerns about unauthorized internal investigations." "Interesting you should mention that, Victor," Alexander replied calmly, placing a folder on the table. "Because I also have some concerns about unauthorized bank transfers to the Cayman Islands." Victor's face paled slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No? Then perhaps we should discuss the Artemis project in detail." Alexander looked around the table. "Or better yet, why don't we talk about how threats were made to employees who tried to expose security flaws?" The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine, sitting near the door, began distributing documents to the board members. "Gentlemen," Alexander continued, "within the next 24 hours a full audit will begin. Every decision, every transfer, every threat will be exposed. The question is, who is willing to cooperate and who would rather face the consequences alone?" Victor stood up abruptly. "You have no idea what you are doing, Alexander. Some doors once opened cannot be closed." "No, Victor. You have no idea what I would do to protect my family." The word family hung in the air, loaded with meaning. Alexander knew he was playing big, but for the first time in his life, the risk was worth it. Somewhere in Brooklyn, your son was probably counting down the days until his trip to the zoo, and nothing, not even the empire he built, would be more important than that. Saturday morning dawned with a promise of change in the air. Alexander adjusted his watch as he watched his reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, he wasn't wearing one of his impeccable suits. Instead of his usual business attire, he opted for jeans and a casual navy blue sweater. The chaos of the last few days at Bennett Technologies still reverberated in his mind. The Artemis project investigation had exposed a web of corruption more extensive than he had imagined. Victor Reynolds had resigned from the board, but not before making veiled threats that kept Alexander in a constant state of alert. "Security confirmed on the zoo perimeter, sir," Richard reported over the phone. 2 discrete teams positioned at the main entrances. "Keep proper distance," Alexander instructed. "I don't want Lucas to notice anything out of the ordinary." Arriving at the Bronx Zoo 20 minutes before the scheduled time, Alexander found Sophia and Lucas already waiting near the entrance. The boy was wearing a t-shirt with dinosaur prints and was practically jumping with excitement. "Alexander!" Lucas shouted, waving enthusiastically. "Mommy said you know everything about the Therizinosaurus." "Good morning, champion," Alexander replied, his heart racing when he heard Lucas say his name so matter-of-factly. "Ready for our prehistoric adventure?" Sophia watched the interaction with a mix of apprehension and tenderness. "He didn't sleep well, he was so anxious," she commented softly as Lucas ran to look at the zoo map. "How are you handling everything?" Alexander asked, noticing the discreet dark circles under her eyes. "Worried," Sophia admitted. "I got a strange call last night. Number blocked." Alexander tensed his jaw. Victor? I'm not sure, but... She was interrupted by Lucas, who ran back. The dinosaur exhibit is this way. The boy instinctively grabbed Alexander's hand, pulling him along the way. The simple, innocent gesture made something inside him snap. Over the next few hours, Alexander discovered a completely new world through his son's eyes. Lucas knew the name of every dinosaur, corrected the guides when they made small mistakes, and was absolutely amazed by the life-size models. Did you know that Therizinosaurus had the longest claws of all dinosaurs? Lucas explained excitedly as they shared a snack. Some scientists think he used it to pick leaves from trees, but I think it was to defend himself too. Very insightful, Alexander commented, exchanging a proud look with Sophia. Have you ever thought about being a paleontologist? What's a paleontologo? Lucas asked, frowning adoringly. He's a scientist who studies dinosaur fossils, Sophia explained. Like the ones who discovered all these dinosaurs, you know. Lucas's eyes widened at the possibility. Can I be one when I grow up? You can be anything you want, love, Sophia replied, but her voice shook slightly. Alexander noticed the change in his behavior. Following his gaze, he noticed a man in a dark suit watching them from afar. He immediately picked up his phone and sent a message to his security team. How about we see the tigers now? He suggested, positioning himself strategically between Sophia and the distant observer. As they walked to the tiger habitat, Alexander had a lively conversation with Lucas about big cats, but his mind was working in multiple directions. Victor was escalating the game, and it was only a matter of time before things got really dangerous. Alexander, Lucas tugged on his sleeve, interrupting his thoughts. Are you going to come back another day? There are lots of other animals we haven't seen yet. The innocent question hit Alexander like a punch in the gut. How to explain the complexity of the situation to a 4-year-old child? How could he promise to always be there when forces beyond his control threatened everything? Of course I do, champ, he replied, surprising himself at the firmness in his own voice. Actually, I was wondering if you and your mom would like to check out my house tomorrow. I have a surprise that I think you'll love. Sophia gave him a questioning look, but Lucas was already jumping with excitement. Can we go, Mommy? Please? Alexander, she began, hesitantly. I don't know if this is a good idea with everything that's going on. Trust me, he murmured, taking advantage of a moment when Lucas was distracted by the tigers. My house is the safest place in town right now, and we need to talk about next steps. Sophia studied his face for a long moment before nodding. Okay, but we need to be careful. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of laughter, stories about dinosaurs, and precious moments that Alexander knew he would treasure forever. When it was time to say goodbye, Lucas surprised him with a tight hug. Thank you for the best day ever, the boy exclaimed. Alexander felt tears forming in his eyes as he hugged his son for the first time. The pleasure was all mine, champ. Watching Sophia and Lucas leave in an armored car he had discreetly arranged, Alexander made a silent promise. Nothing and no one would threaten his family again. It was time to finish what Victor Reynolds had started, once and for all. Alexander's Upper East Side penthouse was a reflection of his success. Minimalist, elegant, and protected by one of the most sophisticated security systems in Manhattan. That Sunday morning, however, the apartment had been transformed. In the office, once dominated by monitors and financial reports, there was now a surprising miniature dinosaur exhibit. Mr. Bennett, Richard entered discreetly. Miss Hayes and young Lucas have just arrived in the lobby. Alexander nervously adjusted the latest model of Velociraptor. How's the security? 3 teams in place, cameras monitoring the entire perimeter, and Catherine has the documents you requested. The private elevator announced the arrival of its visitors. Lucas was the first to enter, his blue-gray eyes widening as he saw the room. Wow! He exclaimed, running towards the miniatures. Mommy, look! They're all scientifically accurate. Sophia entered right behind, her gaze alternating between her son's amazed expression and Alexander's obvious effort to create something special. "You really thought of everything," she murmured, moving closer to him. "Actually," Alexander replied quietly, "I spent all night researching to make sure every detail was correct. I didn't want to disappoint our little expert." Lucas ran from one model to another, excitedly explaining each characteristic of the dinosaurs. "This Ankylosaurus has exactly the right size tail in proportion to its body. And look, Mom, at Deinonychus's feathers." "There's one more surprise," Alexander announced, leading them to his office. One of the walls had been transformed into a giant projection screen, showing an interactive documentary about paleontology. "Can we watch?" Lucas asked, already settling down on the leather sofa. "Of course, champ. But first, how about a snack? I have cookies from that cafe you like." While Lucas was distracted by the dinosaurs and cookies, Alexander led Sophia to the porch. The view of Manhattan stretched out before them, but their thoughts were focused on more pressing matters. "Victor made another move," he reported. "Tried to access old company records last night." "What is he looking for?" "Probably something to incriminate me. But Catherine is 3 steps ahead. We found documents that prove he not only knew of Artemis's flaws, but actively worked to cover them up." Sophia crossed her arms, protecting herself from the cold wind. "What about threats?" "We're monitoring everything. But I need you and Lucas to stay here for a few days." Faced with her surprised look, he continued. "The apartment has 3 suites, a state-of-the-art security system, and—" "Alexander," she interrupted him. "We can't just move here. Lucas has school, I have work, and besides—" She hesitated. "It would be confusing for him." "More confusing than having people follow us? More risky than receiving threatening calls?" He approached, his voice softening. "Sophia, I know I've asked a lot of you these past few days, but this is about your safety." An excited shout from Lucas interrupted the conversation. "Dad! Alexander! Come and see, I discovered something amazing about Spinosaurus." The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander felt his heart stop for a moment as Sophia brought her hand to her lips. Lucas, realizing what he had said, turned red and remained silent. I'm sorry," the boy mumbled, suddenly shy. Alexander crossed the room in 3 long strides, kneeling in front of his son. "It's okay, champ. In fact—" He looked at Sophia, seeking permission in her teary eyes. "You're right. I'm your father." Lucas looked between the 2 adults, processing the information. "Are you? Like, for real?" "Yes, really." "And that's why we have the same eyes?" "Exactly why." Lucas was silent for a moment, his small face scrunched up in concentration. "Does this mean I can call you Dad now?" Alexander felt tears in his eyes. "If you want, I'd love that." The boy smiled, that pure and sincere smile that only children can give. "Cool. Now I have someone to do the T-Rex voice when I play with my dinosaurs." The simplicity with which Lucas accepted the revelation left both Alexander and Sophia moved. She walked over, sitting next to her son. "Lucas, honey, there are some things we need to talk about," she began softly. "About staying here for a few days." "Can we?" he asked excitedly. "Are there more dinosaurs?" "There's an entire collection waiting for you in your room," Alexander replied, enjoying the moment. "My room? If your mother agrees, yes, it's all yours." Sophia sighed, surrendering to the inevitable. "Just for a few days, until we sort out some important things." Lucas celebrated, running off to explore his new territory. When they were alone, Alexander turned to Sophia. "Thank you," he said simply. "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "We have a lot to sort out, and Victor is still out there." "But now we're in this together," Alexander stated, his determination evident. "And I promise I'll do everything right this time." The sound of Lucas's laughter echoed through the apartment, a reminder of what really mattered. The next morning, they would face the council. the lawyers, and all the complications that Victor Reynolds could create. But in that moment, they were just a family beginning to reconnect, with plastic dinosaurs as silent witnesses to their new beginning. Monday arrived with palpable tension in the air. Alexander adjusted his tie as he watched Lucas and Sophia eating breakfast in the kitchen of his penthouse. The domestic scene seemed surreal, her son devouring pancakes while animatedly discussing dinosaurs, Sophia preparing coffee with the familiarity of someone who knew every corner of the kitchen. "Dad, can I come with you today?" Lucas asked, the new title still making Alexander's heart leap in his chest. "Not today, champ. I have some important meetings." He exchanged a meaningful look with Sophia. "But how about Richard brings over that new paleontology game we talked about yesterday?" Lucas's eyes lit up at the mention of the game, but Sophia looked worried. "Alexander, are you sure about today? Victor won't back down easily." "That's exactly why I need to do this now." He checked his watch. "Catherine is waiting with all the paperwork. Reynolds will have no choice." The sound of the elevator announced Richard's arrival, carrying a thick folder and, to Lucas's delight, a colorful box under his arm. "Wow, it's the Jurassic Explorer 3000, Lucas exclaimed, running over to examine the game. "Richard will be staying with you today," Alexander informed Sophia discreetly. "Security has been reinforced, and no one enters this floor without prior authorization." Sophia nodded but grabbed his arm before he could pull away. "Be careful. Victor may have more tricks up his sleeve than we realize." "I always am." He hesitated for a moment before leaning down and gently kissing her forehead, a gesture so natural it surprised them both. In the elevator, Alexander mentally reviewed his strategy. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock, and every minute until then would be crucial. His phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. "New development. I need to see you before the meeting." In the lawyer's office, Alexander encountered not only Catherine but also a familiar figure, Marcus Henderson. "Before you say anything," Marcus began, raising his hands in surrender, "I'm here to help." "To help?" Alexander clenched his fists. "After threatening Sophia? After forcing her to run away pregnant?" "It wasn't like that," Marcus sighed heavily. "Victor had something against me too. He threatened my family if I didn't cooperate with Artemis's scheme." Catherine intervened, scattering documents on her desk. "Marcus brought evidence, Alexander. Emails, bank transfers, recordings, all pointing to a scheme much bigger than we imagined." Alexander pored over the documents, his stomach churning with each new revelation. The Artemis project wasn't just a matter of covert security breaches. It was an elaborate corporate espionage operation, with Victor Reynolds at the center of it all. "Why now?" Alexander questioned Marcus. "Why did you decide to speak?" "Because I saw you with your son at the zoo yesterday," Marcus replied, surprising Alexander. "My granddaughter is his age. I've spent the last 5 years carrying this guilt, watching families destroyed because of Victor's secrets. I've had enough." Alexander's phone rang. It was Richard. "Sir, Victor just arrived at the building, and he's not alone." "Who's with him?" "James Patterson, DISEC." Alexander felt his blood run cold. The Securities and Exchange Commission wouldn't be involved unless— "He's trying to beat us to it," Catherine concluded, already rearranging the documents. "You want to make it look like you discovered the irregularities first." "Not if he doesn't make it to the council room," Alexander declared, his mind already working on a new plan. "Marcus, I need you to do something." Over the next 20 minutes, the Bennett Technologies lobby witnessed a perfectly executed choreography. While Victor and the SEC representative were accidentally held up at the front desk due to a security system issue, Catherine distributed copies of Marcus's documents to each board member. Alexander was standing in the meeting room when Victor finally gained access. The older man's confident smile faltered when he saw Marcus Henderson sitting among the counselors. "Victor," Alexander greeted coldly, "I assume you and Mr. Patterson are here to discuss Project Artemis." "Actually," Victor began, but was interrupted by the sound of several folders being opened simultaneously. Because we are too, Alexander continued, especially the part about how you used the project to sell our clients confidential information to international competitors. Victor's face paled as he recognized the documents in the counselor's hands. This is ridiculous. These accusations are completely substantiated, Catherine added, entering the room with yet another pile of evidence. And Mr. Henderson is willing to testify about every detail. The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of revelations, accusations, and finally, confessions. The SEC representative, realizing he had been manipulated by Victor, quickly shifted his focus to the real criminal. When it was all over, Alexander was exhausted but victorious. Victor would be taken by the SEC. The board had approved a full audit of all projects from the last 10 years. And most importantly, Sophia and Lucas were safe. His phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. Lucas is asking if you'll be home in time to play Jurassic Explorer with him. An involuntary smile tugged at his lips as he typed the reply. Tell our little paleontologist I'm on my way. And Sophia, it's over. We're free. Up in the penthouse, hours later, as he watched Lucas sleep surrounded by his toy dinosaurs, Alexander realized he had built something much more valuable than a corporate empire. He had built a family. He tried to wait up for you, Sophia commented softly, standing in the bedroom doorway. I think we have a lot of time to make up, Alexander replied, intertwining his fingers with hers. The following days brought a new normality to Alexander's coverage. Lucas had transformed the once austere space into prehistoric adventure territory, with toy dinosaurs strategically placed on every available surface. Sophia gradually relaxed her defensive posture, allowing herself to enjoy family moments she never thought possible. On a particularly busy morning, as Lucas prepared for his first day back at school after the crisis with Victor Reynolds, Alexander watched the interaction between mother and son with a mix of admiration and regret for the lost years. Dad, will you pick me up today? Lucas asked, adjusting his dinosaur backpack. I want to show you my science project. I wouldn't miss it for anything, champ, Alexander replied, exchanging a knowing look with Sophia. Actually, I have a surprise planned for after school. Lucas's face lit up. Is it about dinosaurs? Even better, Alexander smiled. But first, school. After dropping Lucas off at St. James, Alexander and Sophia shared a moment of silence in the armored car. Their closeness had intensified over the past few days, but they were both cautiously dancing around unresolved feelings from the past. So, what's this mysterious surprise? Sophia asked, breaking the silence. Remember that house in Greenwich, Connecticut, that you always admired in architecture magazines? Alexander watched the surprise in her eyes. I bought it. Yesterday. Alexander, before you say no, he continued, think of the possibilities. A huge yard for Lucas to play in, away from the chaos of the city, excellent schools, and, he hesitated, a new beginning for all of us. Sophia studied his profile for a moment. You really thought this all through, didn't you? I thought of every detail, including, he smiled, a perfect space for a miniature dinosaur museum. Alexander's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Catherine. Victor's lawyers want to make a deal. What kind of deal? He offers his full resignation and all evidence against his international collaborators in exchange for leniency at the SEC. Alexander considered the proposal. Schedule a meeting for this afternoon. I want this resolved before I pick Lucas up from school. At the Bennett Technologies office, the atmosphere was different. The staff seemed more relaxed, as if an invisible weight had been lifted since Victor's fall. Alexander found Catherine in her office reviewing documents. How's the transition going? He asked. Surprisingly smooth, she replied. The board is fully aligned with the new transparency guidelines, and Artemis project customers have been notified of the security fixes. What about Marcus? Fully cooperating. Your testimony will be critical to the SEC's case. Alexander nodded, his mind already on the next step. I need you to prepare one more thing. He slid an envelope across the table. Succession documents. I want to reorganize the company structure. Catherine looked over the papers, her eyebrows rising. That's a significant change, Alexander. Are you sure? I've never been more sure. Bennett Technologies needs a new direction, one that prioritizes ethics and family over profits. The afternoon brought the expected resolution with Victor, although the bitter taste of betrayal still persisted. When Alexander arrived at St. James, he found Lucas eagerly awaiting his science project, a detailed presentation on the evolutionary adaptations of dinosaurs. Ready for your surprise? Alexander asked as he helped Lucas put his project in the car. Yes, the boy exclaimed. Mommy coming too? She's meeting us there. The trip to Greenwich was filled with Lucas's excited theories about what the surprise would be, each one more elaborate than the last. When they finally arrived at the property, the boy's eyes widened when he saw the colonial mansion surrounded by extensive gardens. Sophia was already waiting for them at the entrance, her expression soft as she observed her son's amazement. What do you think, love? Lucas ran across the lawn, his laughter echoing across the open space. Can we live here? Please? If your mother agrees, Alexander replied, approaching Sophia. What do you say? Ready for a new chapter? She intertwined her fingers with his, a gesture that carried years of untold history. I think it's about time. The afternoon turned into an impromptu tour of the property, with Lucas discovering every corner that could house his prehistoric adventures. In the large office on the ground floor, Alexander could already visualize the showcases that would house his son's dinosaur collection. In the back garden, Sophia identified perfect spaces for a playground and a vegetable garden. There's one more thing you need to see, Alexander announced, leading them to a room on the second floor. Opening the door revealed a space already decorated with a dinosaur theme, including a detailed mural from the Jurassic period. Is this my room? Lucas asked, barely able to contain his excitement. If you want it to be. The little explorer immediately began planning where each of his dinosaurs would stay, their infectious energy filling the space with life and possibilities. Watching his son, Alexander felt Sophia approach. How did you know I would say yes? I didn't know, he admitted, but I've learned that some things are worth the risk of hope. The move to Greenwich happened gradually over the next few weeks, with each day bringing new discoveries and adjustments for the little family. Lucas turned the process into an archaeological expedition, cataloging each box as if it contained precious fossils, especially those with his growing collection of dinosaurs. Alexander balanced his responsibilities at Bennett Technologies with his new role as a father, often holding video conferences from the home office while watching Lucas play in the garden through the picture window. The company's transition was also progressing, with Catherine overseeing the implementation of new transparency and governance policies. Shareholders are surprisingly receptive to the changes, Catherine commented during a virtual meeting. The redemption story is resonating well with the market. It's not just a story, Alexander replied, watching Sophia help Lucas set up an archaeological site in the garden. It's about building something our son can be proud of one day. The mention of Lucas as heir to Bennett Technologies still caused buzz in Manhattan corporate circles, but Alexander was determined to do things differently than his own father. Fortune and power would mean nothing if they came at the expense of integrity. One particularly busy afternoon, as Alexander was reviewing documents in his new office, Lucas came running in, his boots covered in mud from the garden. Dad! Dad! We found something amazing! The boy exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. Lucas! Sophia followed, equally muddy. Remember to clean your feet before you come in. But Mom, we have to show Dad. It could be a real fossil. Alexander smiled, setting down his papers to examine the archaeological find, a rock shaped vaguely like a dinosaur's claw. Impressive, champ. You know, that gave me an idea. Which? Lucas asked, still holding his discovery like it was a precious treasure. How about we transform part of the garden into a real archaeological site, with organized excavations, appropriate tools. Like a real museum? Lucas's eyes widened at the possibility. Exactly. We could even invite your schoolmates on supervised expeditions. Sophia watched the interaction with a soft smile, remembering how Alexander always had a gift for turning ideas into reality. It was one of the qualities that had initially attracted her, before corporate complications separated them. Speaking of school, she interjected gently, someone has homework to finish before dinner. Lucas grimaced but didn't protest much. A new rule established that only paleontologists with their lessons up to date could participate in excavations in the garden. After Lucas went upstairs to clean up and do his homework, Sophia remained in the office, studying Alexander's face. You look different. Different how? Easier. Even with all the chaos of the company transition, you seem at peace. Alexander considered his words. Maybe because I finally understood what really matters. It took me a long time to realize, but now I know that all the success in the world means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. Sophia moved closer, gently touching his face. I missed you, even in the years we spent apart, even when I was angry. I missed you every day. Alexander covered her hand with his own. I'll never let anything separate us again. I promise. The moment was interrupted by an excited scream from upstairs. I'm done with the lesson. Can we go back to the dig now? Laughing, Sophia walked away. Your son inherited your determination. And mother's intelligence, Alexander added, following her out of the office. Night fell over Greenwich, finding the family gathered in the kitchen preparing dinner. Lucas, still excited about plans for his private archaeological site, drew detailed maps of the garden while Sophia and Alexander cooked side by side, a familiar dance they had rediscovered. You know, Alexander commented quietly as he cut vegetables, I haven't shown you every room in the house yet. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Oh no? There's one in particular that I saved for a special moment. He hesitated, his hands pausing on the cutting board. The house's old painting studio. I remember you always talked about painting again one day. Sophia's eyes filled with unshed tears. She had abandoned her passion for art years ago when life on the run with a baby demanded practical choices. Did you remember? I remembered everything, Alexander replied softly. Every dream we shared, every plan we made. And now we can make them come true. The right way this time. Lucas, oblivious to the intensity of the moment between his parents, held up his completed map. Look, I marked all the places where we can find fossils. Amazing, love, Sophia smiled, discreetly wiping her eyes. How about you put this away and help set the table? As he watched his son organize the silverware with the same dedication he applied to his dinosaur projects, Alexander felt a deep certainty settle in his chest. It had taken 5 years, a corporate crisis, and several difficult lessons. But I was finally home. And this time, I was determined to do everything right. News of Bennett Technologies' transformation and its most famous family's move to Greenwich quickly spread through Manhattan social circles. Alexander watched with some amusement the headlines speculating about his mysterious secret family. As he drank coffee in his new kitchen, Lucas devoured dinosaur-shaped pancakes that Sophia had prepared. Look, Dad. The teacher loved my project about evolution, Lucas exclaimed, proudly showing an A+ in red at the top of his work. She said she's never seen a second grader do such detailed research on Therizinosaurus adaptations. That's amazing, champ. Alexander smiled, exchanging a proud look with Sophia. I think this deserves a special celebration. The Natural History Museum has a new interactive exhibit, Sophia suggested, sitting down with her own cup of coffee. Something about modern technology applied to paleontology. Lucas's eyes lit up at the possibility, but before he could respond, Alexander's phone rang. It was Catherine, and at the time she must have been important. I'm sorry, he mumbled, standing up. In the office, Catherine's tense voice filled the room. We have a problem, Alexander. Victor is speaking. The confidentiality agreement. Not about the company, Catherine interrupted. About Lucas. He leaked the story to the tabloid press. People magazine wants to do a cover story on the secret heir to Bennett Technologies. Alexander felt his stomach drop. They had been so careful to shield Lucas from the media, wanting to give him a normal childhood away from the spotlight that inevitably came with the Bennett name. How long do we have? They will publish within 48 hours, with or without our cooperation. Through the office door, Alexander could hear Lucas and Sophia laughing in the kitchen, oblivious to the approaching storm. He had promised himself never to let the corporate world affect his family again. But here Victor was, even in prison, finding ways to upset them. Schedule a meeting with the editor-in-chief for this afternoon, he instructed Catherine, and prepare an official statement. If we're going to do this, it will be on our terms. When she returned to the kitchen, Sophia immediately realized something was wrong. What happened? Can we talk after Lucas goes to school? The little paleontologist in training was too busy organizing his backpack with its prehistoric treasures to notice the tension between his parents. After dropping him off at St. James's, Alexander and Sophia drove in silence to a small cafe in Greenwich, their new refuge for serious conversation. Victor leaked the story about Lucas, Alexander explained, watching the color drain from Sophia's face. People wants to do a cover story. No, Sophia shook her head. He's finally adapting here, making friends, having a normal life. That's why we need to control the narrative. Alexander took her hand across the table. Catherine suggested we do this on our terms. A single controlled interview, photos approved by us, no stalking or harassment. And when this is over, the paparazzi will follow you to school, speculating on every detail of your life. Not if we can help it. Alexander squeezed his hand gently. I have an idea, but we need to be in this together. The afternoon brought a tense meeting at the People magazine offices in Manhattan. Alexander and Catherine faced the editor-in-chief with a clear proposal. A single, exclusive article, focused not on the sensational aspect, but on the story of redemption and family reconciliation. In exchange, the magazine would sign a non-stalking agreement, protecting Lucas from media harassment. It's a powerful story, the editor admitted, leafing through the dossier Catherine had prepared. The workaholic billionaire who discovers he has a son and abandons everything for family love? Our readers will love it. On one condition, Alexander added. The article should also address the changes at Bennett Technologies, how we are prioritizing ethics and transparency, transforming the legacy we want to leave for Lucas. Back in Greenwich, they found Sophia and Lucas in the garden, working on their ever-expanding archaeological site. The boy had convinced some classmates to join his expedition, and now a small group of children were carefully digging under Sophia's amused supervision. Father, Lucas nodded enthusiastically. We found 3 more fossils today. Well, Emma says they're just rocks, but I know they're special. Alexander joined the children on the floor, completely ignoring his $3,000 Italian suit. You know, champ, real paleontologists sometimes have to deal with the press to tell the world about their discoveries. Like Dr. Grant in Jurassic Park? Lucas asked, his eyes shining at the parallel. Something like that. Alexander smiled, exchanging a meaningful look with Sophia. What do you think about us telling our story to some people, about how we found our own Jurassic adventure? Lucas considered the proposal with all the seriousness of his 6 years. Can I show you my dinosaur collection and tell you about our excavations? Of course I do, love. Sophia came over, sitting down next to them. But only if you want. I do. Maybe other kids will want to be paleontologists too when they see how cool it is. That night, after the little archaeologists were picked up by their parents, and Lucas was safely asleep in his dinosaur-themed room, Alexander and Sophia sat on the porch, gazing at the Greenwich stars. He's amazing. You know that? Alexander commented. So resilient, so full of life and curiosity. Just like her father, Sophia smiled, leaning back against his chest, always turning challenges into opportunities. The photo shoot for People magazine turned into a family adventure when Lucas insisted on including his entire dinosaur collection in the shoot. The photographer, initially frustrated with the idea of deviating from the traditional glamour of celebrity photos, ended up captured by the boys' infectious enthusiasm. "And this is Therizinosaurus," Lucas explained patiently to the photographer, who was now kneeling on the garden floor, completely oblivious to his state-of-the-art equipment. Its claws were bigger than any other dinosaur. Alexander watched the scene with a mix of pride and concern. People journalist Amanda Chen, sitting next to him on the terrace, furiously taking notes. "He's extraordinary," Amanda commented, watching Lucas give his impromptu paleontology lesson. "Nothing we expected from the heir to a billion-dollar empire." "Lucas is much more than an heir," Alexander replied, his tone firm but gentle. "He's a 6-year-old boy who loves dinosaurs and has the purest heart I've ever met." Sophia emerged from the house carrying a tray of lemonade, her presence automatically softening the tension in the air. Over the past few days, she had shown herself extraordinarily strong in the face of impending exposure, focusing her energy on protecting the normalcy of Lucas's life. "The publisher called," Amanda reported, accepting a glass of lemonade. "They loved the angle we were developing. The Billionaire Paleontologist, a story about how a corporate empire was transformed by a child's love of dinosaurs." Alexander and Sophia exchanged a meaningful look. The narrative was perfect. It focused on Lucas's innocent passion for paleontology, diverting attention from the more sensationalist aspects of the story. "Father," Lucas called from the garden, "can I show them the archaeological site, please?" "Of course, champ," Alexander replied, standing up. "But remember what we talked about restricted areas." Lucas had developed an elaborate system of ropes and markings at his archaeological site, delimiting areas under excavation and preserved for future study. His classmates, initially skeptical, now begged to join the after-school expeditions. "This is where we found the first fossil," Lucas explained solemnly to Amanda and the photographer. "Well, Mom says it's probably just an old rock, but I'm holding out hope." Amanda laughed, enchanted by the little paleontologist's seriousness. "And what do your friends at school think of all this?" "They think it's super cool," Lucas responded excitedly. "Emma even convinced her dad to buy an archaeology kit, and Jason is reading every dinosaur book in the library." As Lucas led his tour, Alexander pulled Sophia aside. "Catherine called earlier. Victor is requesting a visit." "No," Sophia replied instantly, her body tensing. "He's already done enough damage." "I agree, but he's claiming to have more information about Project Artemis, things that could affect the company's restructuring." Sophia watched Lucas demonstrate his digging techniques, her heart clenching at the thought of more secrets and threats hanging over them. "What are you going to do?" "Catherine can handle him. My priority right now is our family." Alexander intertwined his fingers with hers. "I'm not going to let anything threaten what we've built here." The afternoon progressed with more photos and interviews, but always under the terms established by Alexander and Sophia. Lucas, naturally charismatic, enchanted the magazine's team with his detailed explanations about each dinosaur in his collection and his theories about where to find more fossils in the garden. As the sun began to set, dyeing the Greenwich sky in shades of pink and gold, Amanda asked Lucas one last question. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "A famous paleontologist," Lucas responded without hesitation. "But I also want to help Dad with his company, because he said that one day I'll be able to use technology to make important discoveries about dinosaurs." Alexander felt his heart swell at his son's words. Somewhere between board meetings and garden digging, his own dreams for the future of Bennett Technologies had transformed. It was no longer about power or profit, but about creating something that could make a difference in the world, something that his son could proudly call his own one day. After the magazine team left, the family gathered in the kitchen to prepare dinner, a tradition they had established since moving to Greenwich. Lucas, still excited about the day's events, excitedly narrated his plans for future paleontological discoveries. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Sophia asked softly as she cut vegetables. Alexander watched his son demonstrate a theory about herd behavior using broccoli as model dinosaurs. "I think we've given him the tools to deal with whatever comes his way, and most importantly, he knows we're here to protect him." "Always," Sophia agreed, leaning back against his chest momentarily. Night fell over Greenwich, finding the Bennett family gathered around the kitchen table, sharing stories and dreams, protected by the love they had rediscovered and strengthened. Outside, the archaeological site awaited new adventures, a symbol of the extraordinary world a child had created, a world where dinosaurs and billionaires coexisted perfectly, united by the transformative power of family love. The People magazine article made exactly the impact Alexander and Sophia had hoped for. The photos of Lucas passionately explaining dinosaurs at his makeshift archaeological site captured the audience's hearts, transforming what could have been a sensational scandal into a touching story about family and redemption. "Look, Dad," Lucas exclaimed during breakfast, pointing excitedly at the tablet screen where several of his classmates had shared the story online. "Emma said everyone wants to be a paleontologist now." Alexander smiled over his coffee cup, watching as his son remained adorably oblivious to the larger aspect of the media exposure. For Lucas, the report was simply an opportunity to share his passion for dinosaurs with a wider audience. "Mr. Bennett?" Richard interrupted discreetly, entering the kitchen with a worried expression. "We have a situation that requires your immediate attention." "Not now, Richard," Alexander began, but the seriousness on his assistant's face gave him pause. "It's about Victor. He tried to contact Lucas directly through the school." Sophia, who was preparing Lucas's lunch for school, froze. He sent a letter addressed to Lucas, along with a gift, a rare book on paleontology. Security intercepted it before it reached his hands. Alexander felt his blood boil, but he maintained his composure when he noticed Lucas watching the conversation with curiosity. "Champion, how about you go get your backpack? It's almost time for school." As soon as Lucas left the kitchen, Alexander turned to Richard. "I want increased security at St. James immediately, and schedule a meeting with our lawyers for this afternoon." "Alexander," Sophia touched his arm gently, "perhaps we should consider—" "No," he interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "We're not going to let Victor force us to change our lives again. Lucas is happy here. He has friends. He's progressing in school. We're going to handle this the right way." The morning progressed with an underlying tension that they struggled to keep away from Lucas. At St. James, Alexander personally checked on the new safety protocols implemented, while Sophia spoke with the principal about the situation. "We guarantee that only authorized people will have access to Lucas," the director assured. "And our team is aware to monitor any suspicious activity." Back at the Bennett Technologies office, Alexander found Catherine waiting with additional news. "Victor is playing a dangerous game," she explained, scattering documents on the table. The letter to Lucas wasn't just an innocent gift. There were coded messages about Project Artemis, suggesting that secrets still exist that could harm the company. "What exactly does he want?" Alexander asked, his frustration evident. "A negotiation. He offers complete silence in exchange for leniency and an advisory position in the company's restructuring." "Absolutely not," Alexander replied without hesitation. "I will not allow him anywhere near the company or my family again." The afternoon brought a series of strategic meetings with the legal team, developing a plan to protect both the company and Lucas from Victor's manipulations. In between arguments, Alexander received constant updates about his son's school day through the security system. "Father?" Lucas's excited voice filled his office over the phone during a brief break between meetings. "You won't believe it. The teacher let me give a talk about dinosaurs to the whole class today." "Really, champion? And how was it?" "It was amazing. Everyone asked questions, and I showed them photos of our archaeological site, and now the teacher wants to organize a class trip to see our digs." Lucas's genuine enthusiasm was like a balm for the tension of the day. Alexander exchanged a look with Catherine, who was smiling discreetly across the table. "That's wonderful, son. I can't wait for you to tell me all the details when I get home." After ending the call, Alexander leaned back in his chair, a new determination forming in his mind. "Catherine, I want you to prepare an additional document, an educational foundation, focused on natural sciences and paleontology for children." "A foundation?" "Yes. If Victor wants war, let's show him how the legacy of Bennett Technologies can be used for something positive, something Lucas can be proud to inherit one day." The sun was already setting when Alexander finally returned to Greenwich. He found Sophia and Lucas in the garden, where their son was enthusiastically explaining to a small group of classmates the basic principles of a paleontological dig. "And remember," Lucas instructed solemnly, "a true scientist always documents everything he finds." Alexander watched the scene for a moment, his heart filling with a mixture of pride and protective determination. Victor could have all the corporate secrets in the world, but he would never understand the true treasure that Bennett Technologies had discovered, not in profits or power, but in the innocent smile of a boy who dreamed of dinosaurs. "Father!" Lucas ran to hug him when he noticed him. "You arrived just in time. We were about to make an important discovery." "And even?" Alexander smiled, kneeling down to his son's level. "Then I guess I'd better get my digging gear on, huh?" As he changed out of his suit for clothes more appropriate for archaeology, Alexander knew they faced more challenges ahead. But with every smile Lucas made, every excited discovery in the garden, every family moment, he grew stronger in his resolve. Victor and his secrets were in the past. The future was in the little hands that held digging brushes with as much care and dreams as big as the dinosaurs he loved so much. The Bennett Foundation for Natural Sciences and Paleontology opened on a sunny autumn morning, with Lucas solemnly cutting the opening banner using scissors decorated with little dinosaurs. The event, held in the sprawling gardens of the Greenwich Mansion, brought together scientists, educators, and most importantly, dozens of children eager to explore the new educational center. "And here," Lucas explained to a group of amazed visitors, "we have a life-size replica of a Titanosaurus egg." His encyclopedic knowledge and infectious enthusiasm made him the perfect guide to the new space. Alexander watched proudly as his son led the tour, wearing a custom lab coat with his name embroidered on it, and an official junior paleontologist badge. Sophia approached, intertwining her fingers with his. "He's in his element," she commented softly. Who knew that little dinosaur-obsessed boy would become a real educator? "Just like Mom." Alexander smiled, remembering the days when Sophia taught marketing at a university, before everything changed. Catherine crossed the garden towards him, holding a folder. "The latest documents have arrived from the court," she informed him discreetly. "Victor has accepted the final agreement. No more contact, no more attempts at manipulation." The news brought immense relief, although Alexander knew the real victory lay not in the legal papers, but in his son's beaming smile as he shared his passion with other children. "Dad, Mom," Lucas called, waving energetically. "Come and see. Dr. Patterson brought a real fossil to show you." Dr. James Patterson, a renowned paleontologist whom Alexander had hired as a consultant for the foundation, was surrounded by fascinated children as he explained the process of fossilization. Lucas, of course, already knew every detail, but he still watched in awe. "Did you know your son has a natural talent for this?" Dr. Patterson commented as Alexander and Sophia approached. "He asked questions today that some of my undergraduate students would have difficulty asking." The pride in Alexander's chest grew even more. The foundation had been conceived as a response to Victor's manipulations, but it was growing into something much greater. A true legacy, not built on corporate secrets, but on education, discovery, and pure joy. "Mr. Bennett," Richard approached discreetly, "the National Geographic team has arrived for the interview." The magazine had shown interest in writing a story about the foundation, focusing especially on the impact it was having on children's scientific education. Lucas naturally was thrilled at the prospect of appearing in his favorite science magazine. "Can we show them the new lab?" Lucas asked anxiously, referring to the junior research space that had been set up in one of the mansion's wings. "Of course, champ," Alexander smiled. "Why don't you take Dr. Patterson with you to explain the equipment?" While Lucas enthusiastically guided the group through the tour, Sophia and Alexander remained in the garden, observing the families exploring the various educational stations spread throughout the space. "Remember when you said you wanted to build something Lucas could be proud to inherit?" Sophia asked softly. "I think you achieved much more than that." Alexander hugged her waist from behind, both of them watching their son shine in his element. "We did it," he corrected. "You always knew what was really important, even when I was blinded by corporate power." The sound of children's laughter echoed through the garden as children took part in a supervised dig. The Lucas Archaeological Site had been expanded and professionalized, with dedicated areas for different levels of experience and age. "Father," Lucas called again, running towards him with glowing eyes. "The reporter wants to know if we can do a digging demonstration. Can I show you the technique Dr. Patterson taught me?" "Of course you can, love," Sophia replied before Alexander could speak. "But remember what we talked about safety first." "I know, Mom. Safety glasses and gloves always," Lucas recited proudly, already running back to his group of little paleontologists in training. The afternoon progressed with a series of educational activities, culminating in an informal talk from Lucas about his paleontological journey, as he liked to call his obsession with dinosaurs. Sitting among the delighted audience, Alexander and Sophia could hardly believe the transformation of their shy son into the confident little teacher who now answered questions with authority surprising for his age. "And remember," Lucas concluded his presentation with professional gravitas, "every fossil tells a story. Our mission as paleontologists is to discover these stories and share them with the world." The applause that followed was genuine and enthusiastic, making Lucas blush with pride. Alexander felt his eyes well up as he watched his son politely thank each person who came to greet him afterwards. "Mr. Bennett," the National Geographic reporter approached, "your son is truly extraordinary. But what impresses me most is how the Foundation is turning his interest into an opportunity for other children to discover science. Lucas taught us that sometimes the greatest treasures are not the ones we first look for," Alexander responded, watching his son demonstrate digging techniques to a group of fascinated children. "Sometimes they are right before our eyes, just waiting to be discovered." Night fell over Greenwich, finding the Bennett family gathered in their cozy kitchen. Lucas, still wearing his paleontologist's coat, animatedly narrated each moment of the day as he devoured his dinner. "And you know what's coolest?" he asked between bites. "Dr. Patterson said we can organize a real expedition over the holidays, with professional equipment and everything." Alexander and Sophia exchanged knowing smiles. The life they had built was far from the one they imagined years ago, when power and corporate success seemed to be all that mattered. Now his greatest wealth was measured in smiles, discoveries, and small moments of wonder shared as a family. 6 months after the Bennett Foundation opened, the Greenwich Mansion had become a true center of learning and discovery. What began as the dream of a boy passionate about dinosaurs was now inspiring hundreds of potential young scientists. One particularly meaningful morning, Alexander watched from his office window as Lucas led his first official class in the Little Paleontologists program. Wearing his custom lab coat and carrying a small briefcase filled with digging tools, his 7-year-old son displayed a confidence and maturity that often surprised him. "Mr. Bennett," Richard interrupted his thoughts, "last quarter's results are in. The Foundation has exceeded all social impact expectations. Bennett Technologies. The shares reached an all-time high. Apparently, transforming a corporate empire into a force for education and science was well received by the market." Alexander smiled, remembering how drastically his priorities had changed over the past few months. The sound of children's laughter filled his office as Lucas led his group of students closer to the window, excitedly explaining about different geological periods. "See?" Lucas's excited voice echoed through the garden. "Here we can clearly see the different layers of sediment, exactly as it happened millions of years ago." Sophia entered the office carrying 2 cups of coffee, a tradition they had maintained since their reconciliation. "Our little professor is a hit," she commented, handing Alexander a cup. "Just like Mom," he replied, pulling her close. "How's the studio project going?" The former painting studio had become Sophia's creative haven, where she combined her passion for art with educational projects for the foundation. His scientific illustrations of dinosaurs had become an integral part of the teaching materials used in classes. "I finished the illustrations for the new textbook," she smiled. Lucas insisted on reviewing every anatomical detail. Apparently, we have a very demanding consultant. Alexander's phone buzzed. A message from Catherine. "Final paperwork on Victor completed. He's officially off the board and has no rights to any aspect of the company." It was the definitive closure of a turbulent chapter in their lives. Victor Reynolds had finally accepted his defeat, realizing there was no way to combat the positive legacy the Bennett family was building. "Dad! Mom!" Lucas burst into the office, his eyes shining with excitement. "You won't believe it. Dr. Patterson just confirmed. We're going on a real expedition in the summer, in Montana." "Montana?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Yes, you have an amazing paleontological place there, and Dr. Patterson said I can be your official junior assistant." Alexander exchanged a knowing look with Sophia. They already knew about the expedition. In fact, they had helped organize it as a surprise for Lucas's birthday. "That's amazing, champ," Alexander smiled. "I think we're going to need some new gear for this adventure. Can I show it to my class? Please?" Lucas was practically jumping with excitement. "Of course, love," Sophia replied. "But first, finish your class. Remember what we said about professional responsibility." Lucas nodded solemnly before running back to his group of students, already planning how he would share the news. "He's grown so much," Alexander commented, hugging Sophia from behind as they watched their son resume class with renewed enthusiasm. "Not just him," she replied softly. "We all grow up." The afternoon brought a special foundation meeting, where Lucas proudly presented the results of the first semester of the educational program. Sitting in the front row, Alexander and Sophia watched in amazement as their son discussed participation statistics and educational impact with the ease of a seasoned professional. And most importantly, Lucas concluded his presentation, is that more and more kids are discovering that science can be fun. It's not just about memorizing dinosaur names. It's about exploring, discovering, and dreaming big. The applause was warm, but no heartbeat with more pride than Alexander's. His son hadn't just inherited his name or his company. He had transformed it into something bigger, more meaningful. That night, after the last visitors had left and Lucas had finally fallen asleep surrounded by his paleontology books, Alexander and Sophia sat on the porch of their house, gazing at the stars of Greenwich. "You know," Alexander began, "when I found out about Lucas, I thought my life was falling apart. The empire I'd built, my reputation, everything felt at risk. And now I realize I was building the wrong things. True legacy isn't in skyscrapers or bank accounts. It's in the shining eyes of every child who discovers their passion for science. It's in our child's smile when they make a new discovery." Sophia snuggled closer to him. "And it's in the love we rebuild, in the family we form." "Exactly," Alexander smiled, gently kissing her forehead. "Who knew a little paleontologist would be our greatest treasure?" The silence of the night was broken by the soft sound of footsteps. Lucas, in his dinosaur pajamas, sleepily shuffling towards them. "Can't sleep, champ?" "I was thinking about Montana," he yawned, snuggling between his parents. "Did you guys know they found a new type of dinosaur there last year?" Alexander and Sophia exchanged smiles as their son began another of his passionate explanations about paleontology. Under the stars of Greenwich, the Bennett family had found their own precious fossil, not buried in layers of ancient rock, but built in layers of love, forgiveness, and new beginnings. And this, more than any other, was a treasure worth preserving forever.